2007, when the Stamper brothers announced their departure from Rare to pursue other opportunities, it was likely the first time many of the developer's fans became aware of its founders. For as much as their games became highly regarded, few people outside of Nintendo were even aware of the people behind them. This was due to the Stampers' long-standing tradition of conducting very few interviews and hardly ever making public appearances in the media. As a result, most players were not familiar with the actual designers of their favorite games, beyond a list of names in the credits. Throughout Rare's history, a number of their top employees had departed from the company to start their own, each with varying degrees of success. The first instance of this being reported was back in 1997, when a small group of developers departed from Rare to form a new studio called Eighth Wonder. They were provided funding through Sony Computer Entertainment Europe, who had committed to publishing their first 3 games. Unfortunately, Eighth Wonder was unable to produce any of them before the company shut down. Between the release of GoldenEye in 1997 and the development of Perfect Dark the following year, a number of its original staff members departed from Rare for new positions and companies. Martin Hollis, a programmer on Killer Instinct and director-producer of GoldenEye, traveled the world following his exit from Rare and went on to become a consultant at Nintendo of America during the development of the GameCube, helping ensure it be developer-friendly. In the year 2000, he founded a small company in Cambridge, England named Tsunami. There, Martin would only produce a few games during its run, including Zendoku through publisher Eidos, Go Puzzle through Sony Interactive Entertainment and developer Cohort Studios, and finally Bonsai Barber through publisher Nintendo. Whenever asked why he chose to pursue these projects over the ones he became known for, Hollis points to having a different outlook on life. While he still considers himself a fan of James Bond, his time spent working on GoldenEye and its successor Perfect Dark has also made him lose interest in the genre. Other prominent members who worked on GoldenEye and Perfect Dark before departing Rare were David Doak, Steve Ellis, Carl Hilton, and composer Graham Norgate. In 1998, they founded the company Free Radical Design, where they produced the first-person shooter series Time Splitters. The first 2 games were published by Eidos Interactive, with the second game often considered one of the best multiplayer shooters for its time. After their adventure game Second Sight through Codemasters in 2004, they released Time Splitters Future Perfect the following year through Electronic Arts, which is less often remarked upon, but still had a noteworthy campaign, which placed a greater emphasis on funny scenarios.
Hey, you're no zombie!
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Free Radical was initially hired to work on Star Wars Battlefront 3, but following the game's sudden cancellation and the abysmal reception to their other game Haze with publisher Ubisoft in 2008, the company had gone bankrupt and was forced to shut down. The remaining core team would later be purchased by German developer Crytek and morphed into Crytek UK to work on their Crysis series before changing to Dambuster Studios in 2014 to work on the poorly received Homefront The Revolution from publisher Deep Silver. Following Haze, David Doak would leave Free Radical to found another studio that designed games for Facebook until it closed down in 2013. Over the years, there's been speculation over a new installment in the Time Splitter series, but given all the acquisitions and changeovers with the original team, it's difficult to know how that could even come about, let alone become a viable undertaking anytime soon. In 2008, following the Stampers' departure, it was announced that Rare would be developing special avatar characters for Xbox 360 players as part of Microsoft's new Xbox Experience initiative. While they bore a striking resemblance to Nintendo's own avatars, the Miis, the developers claimed this was something conceptualized long before their more ubiquitous counterpart. The avatars would go on to be featured in a number of compatible titles for the system, including Rare's next big game, Kinect Sports, released in 2010. When Microsoft shifted Rare's focus to develop games for the Kinect camera, studio director and longtime member Mark Betteridge was replaced by Scott Henson, a designer with the history of developing for the Xbox 360. Kinect Sports was a collection of simulation games, streamlined to have the same appeal as a game like Nintendo's Wii Sports. Despite concerns from the development team regarding the Kinect's limitations and the near-universal backlash the game received from the company's longtime fans, Kinect Sports proved to be Rare's biggest commercial success for Microsoft, selling 3 million units in about 6 months. The game would even go on to receive numerous accolades, including a BAFTA award for Family Game of the Year. A sequel was released the following year titled Kinect Sports Season 2, which was developed through a collaboration with Big Park, another Microsoft studio based in Canada. This game would also prove to be a success for Rare, both critically and commercially.
And the BAFTA goes to Kinect Sports 2.
Around this time, Craig Duncan was hired as a senior studio director at Rare, with a mission to reshape the company's offices into an environment that encouraged the sharing of ideas between its development teams. In 2014, Rare would release Kinect Sports Rivals for the Xbox One. The game had one of the company's largest development teams at 150, along with a new specially designed engine. Unfortunately, the game was a commercial failure, partly due to releasing after the system's launch, when support for the Kinect camera significantly dropped off. It wasn't long after that Microsoft announced the Kinect would no longer be a priority going forward, and Rare staff experienced over a dozen layoffs made up of design and project managers. Staff layoffs and resignations at Rare resulted in a number of their senior members moving on to other endeavors, like founding a new studio to develop the games they wanted to make. As many designers left the company without much fanfare, it's difficult to determine where they all ended up and what games they managed to produce, if any. The following about to be discussed are just some of the more noteworthy ones that have been made public over the years. In 2009, a number of lead designers from the Perfect Dark and Killer Instinct teams, including Mark Edmonds and Chris Tilston, formed Starfire Studios. Their first and only release was Fusion Genesis, a sci-fi twin-stick shooter with RPG elements and music from Rare composer Steve Burke. The company lasted until 2013, when its members moved on to other game companies. In 2010, Phil Tossell, former software engineer on Star Fox Adventures, Cameo, and Kinect Sports, co-founded the company Nyam Nyam. Their first release was Tengami in 2014, which was an adventure game inspired by Japanese paintings that took place in a 3D pop-up book. The music for the game was composed by a fellow Rare veteran, David Wise. Wise originally resigned from Rare back in 2009 in order to become a freelance composer and create his own personal studio. Besides Tengami, he composed music for games like Snake Pass and even returned to the Nintendo franchise from where most fans know of his work, with Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Another composer at Rare who became a freelancer was Grant Kirkhope.
I apologize for the Donkey Kong rap.
Following his departure, he would compose music for a variety of games from different publishers. Highlights include the action RPG Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning from 38 Studios, the action game Yaiba Ninja Gaiden Z from Spark Unlimited, and the tactical RPG Mario + Rabbids Kingdom Battle from Ubisoft. After leaving Rare to join Free Radical, Martin Wakely, the lead designer on games like Blast Corps, Jet Force Gemini, and Mickey Speedway USA, founded the company Crash Lab in 2011 with fellow Rare veterans Steve Ellis, Lee Musgrave, and Graham Norgate. The company primarily developed games for mobile devices, with their most successful title being The Snowman and the Snow Dog, based on the film of the same name, which garnered over 1 million downloads. After completing Kinect Sports Season 2, Lee Schuneman, best known for directing Diddy Kong Racing and Star Fox Adventures, departed from Rare to establish Lift London in 2013, a new studio under Microsoft with the mission to discover new experiences in games and entertainment by hiring talented minds to get them there. This was around the same time George Andreas, best known for his work on Donkey Kong 64 and Cameo Elements of Power, left Rare to become a creative director at Sony Computer Entertainment Europe. There he served as a senior creative director on a number of virtual reality experiences, including London Heist, featured in PlayStation VR Worlds. After that, he became a creative director for developer King, best known for the wildly successful game Candy Crush. When Mark Betteridge left his position as Rare Studio Director, he co-founded the software company Precious Blue Dot with fellow Rare alum Lee Musgrave in 2010. Together they took their knowledge of designing games and applied it to the financial sector. For example, they would be hired by the investment firm Seven Investment Management to design a mobile app intended to make their financial services more engaging and any relevant data more understandable to prospective clients.
Using 7 Imagine is fun. It's simple. It's actually just like playing a game. And there's a good reason for that. We didn't make it with people who work in the financial services world. We made it in partnership with a group of games makers who in their early lives made Donkey Kong and GoldenEye and a load of other stuff.
In 2015, the pair would co-found the video streaming application known as MyEye. When Microsoft established a new studio for Rare in Birmingham, designer Chris Seaver transferred there to work for about a year. At times he found he didn't like the way things were getting done as he preferred to be the one in charge. Still, Chris didn't complain much since he was mostly put in charge of light work, like designing graphics for promotional materials and getting paid to work with his friends. Then, in 2011, it was announced that Microsoft would be firing all the artists, leaving behind only a small portion of the team. Within a month, Chris was out of Rare, though given the offer from Microsoft he couldn't refuse, perhaps it was worth leaving the company under duress.
As it turned out, it was good for me. I got some cash out of that because I've been there a long time and they were very generous.
Initially, Chris spent his newly free time for himself, but his desire to design video games eventually returned.
I kind of dossed around for about a year, mainly playing games because ironically I don't play many games when I'm working. So I played a load of games and I thought I could do this for the rest of my life. This is fucking ace. And a year later I went, I can't do this anymore. I've got to do something. I've been wasting my life here. I've got to do something. You know, I've got stuff to do still. I've got ideas I want to, whether they're good or bad, I don't know. And there's a couple of friends who were around who were sort of saying the same thing. So I kind of made some phone calls and a few people said, yeah, all right. Yeah, let's do something. So we sort of just started doing some work. And then when we had something, Parachute Stand, which was just a little iOS game that we knocked up, just to see if it would work. And more than anything, it was more about the process than about the product. It took us about 8 months to make, and we just wanted to see if we could all work from home and still manage to produce something. And it did. It worked really well. It actually worked better than being in the corridor. So I found, which I was surprised at, because I thought I'd have a real difficulty getting to my desk every day and actually doing some work when there's so many other distractions, because it's so easy just to go, oh, sod it, I'll just do a quick go of this. But actually what happened was I partitioned the work. I said, right, from this time to this time I'm doing this. And I did it, and it worked. And I thought, this is all right. Obviously I'm paying myself, so I'm not on any salary. And then we got the game done and we went, okay, well, we might as well form a company then, because we have to go on iOS, you can't do it on your own person. So we did that, and then we went, okay, let's do another one. It's kind of ballooned. We've gone from being sort of, yeah, okay, we'll make this, and then it's quite serious now. We're quite serious about what we're doing. And people are responding. So hopefully this will be like the bigger things. If that's fine, we'll do another game, and then we'll do another game. And we'll keep going.
Chris would go on to found the company Gory Detail along with fellow Rare alum Sean Pyle. Their first release was Parachute Stand, a game designed for mobile devices. Currently, he and Sean are working on the unlikely legend of Rusty Pup, which is expected to release on a number of platforms. Going forward, Chris hopes to continue designing games without the constraints of an overseeing publisher and lofty sales expectations.
The reason I'm doing this is because I want to make what I want to make. And if you don't like it, that's fair enough. And we won't get any money and we won't make any more. Hopefully they will, and they'll make some money, and then we'll make some more games that I want to make. But we're not out to redefine the industry or to become a $1 million company and sell to this. That's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because I've got an idea and I think other people may like it too.
With Rare seemingly focused on the Kinect over the past couple years, there wasn't much hope for fans to see the return of any of their older properties. That wasn't until 2013 when Microsoft announced a new installment in their classic fighting game series coming to Xbox One. Simply titled Killer Instinct, the game would serve as a soft reboot of the series with the development handled by Double Helix Games, under the supervision of Ken Lobb. While some members of Rare would assist in its development, there were still concerns early on, like the game using a free-to-play model and coming primarily from an untested developer, but Killer Instinct successfully built upon the foundations of the past games, and was highly praised for its layered mechanics, extensive tutorials, and impressive netcode. The development team consisted of many highly regarded figures from other fighting game circles, including James Goddard, who previously worked on Street Fighter II, and Rich Bantegi, a prominent player from the Tekken community. Killer Instinct's classic soundtrack was lovingly arranged in the new game by composer Mick Gordon, who was a longtime fan of the series. When Double Helix Games was acquired by Amazon the following year, further development would be handled by Iron Galaxy Studios. For the next few years, Killer Instinct's game features would expand, as would its roster to dozens of characters, consisting of every original character, new faces introduced to the series, guest characters from Microsoft-published games like Halo and Gears of War, and even Rash from Rare's Battletoads series. Thanks to having a development team of dedicated fans and the proper supervision of Microsoft, Killer Instinct has not only become one of the most highly regarded fighting games among the genre's communities, but it is considered one of the best games ever produced by Microsoft's game studios. Whenever designers from Rare broke away to work on other video games or found a new company, a lot of their fans wouldn't hear of them until long after the fact, but the one that caught the biggest headlines was undoubtedly Playtonic Games. In 2012, there were rumors circulating that a group of former employees wished to develop a spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie. It wouldn't be until 2015 when their new studio would be formed, and their first project, titled Yooka-Laylee, would seek funding through the website Kickstarter. The project reached its goal in under an hour, became the fastest project to surpass $1 million in funding, and concluded with over 10 times what was originally proposed. Initially, Playtonic Games consisted of 6 former members of Rare, but after they found success with Kickstarter, the main team expanded to more than a dozen. The list of people part of the Yooka-Laylee team was a who's who of senior designers throughout Rare's storied legacy. Project director Chris Sutherland had been with Rare for 25 years as a software engineer on games dating back to Battletoads, though most players would know him best for his vocal roles.
Ultra Combo!
Creative lead Gavin Price had worked on Banjo-Kazooie and Viva Pinata. Steve Males was the art director on a number of Donkey Kong titles. Artist Kevin Bayliss had designed characters for Killer Instinct and Diddy Kong Racing, and the game's soundtrack would feature contributions from 3 of Rare's former composers, David Wise, Grant Kirkhope, and Steve Burke. With the help of publisher Team 17, Yooka-Laylee was released on a number of different platforms in 2017. The reception was not universally favorable, however, as many players felt the game had the same gameplay design and structure found in the team's past works, but with none of the lessons learned from their numerous contemporaries released ever since. On the other hand, there was also a general opinion among other longtime fans of Rare that Yooka-Laylee provided them the 3D platformer experience they've wanted for a long time, and Playtonic Games had established itself as another viable outlet for those games going forward. As these designers were continuing to work outside of Rare, the last people many expected to hear from were the Stamper brothers themselves, as it was assumed they were simply enjoying their long-earned retirement. But in 2013, with very little fanfare, the Stampers founded a new studio in Nottingham, England, called Fortune Fish, which would be headed by Tim's son, Joe Stamper. Their first game releases were nothing newsworthy, as it included a mobile game in 2015 titled That Bouncy Thing, the rubbishiest game ever, followed by a puzzle game titled Cat Logic. In that same year, Tim and Chris Stamper were jointly named as the year's development legends at the Develop Industry Excellence Awards in Brighton, marking one of Tim Stamper's more recent public appearances following the brothers' departure from Rare.
Well, I really don't know what to say. I've worked with a lot of talented guys and girls in the 30-something years that we've been producing games, and it's been absolutely wonderful.
They continued to recruit new talent for their studio, though the Stampers remain just as secretive as ever in regards to what new games they have planned in the future.
You know, Chris and I haven't stopped working. The last 8 years, we've been working harder than we've ever worked before.
In an interview, Tim Stamper said that while he and his brother left Microsoft on good terms, they knew they needed to take a new direction to produce something better for the future, and the only way they'd be able to do that was to take a step sideways and pursue a new venture. When asked why they choose to remain so guarded, Tim explained how their goal to produce the very best product they can meant taking up all of their time. For him, time spent conducting an interview somewhere is time not spent on development and design. He's done this his whole life and is still doing it now because time is very valuable to him. Looking ahead, Tim believes he wouldn't have trouble producing a new studio like Rare, as it would just need to have its own direction. With so many of its former employees making headlines outside Rare, it's easily forgotten that longtime members continue to run the company from inside. Veterans like Greg Males and Robin Beanland still remain and serve as the company's design director and main composer respectively. Despite the disappointing reception to Kinect Sports' rivals, Craig Duncan's ongoing mission to reshape the British developer would continue undeterred. In 2015, they released Rare Replay, a compilation of 30 games designed by the company. It was the first time players could access titles throughout Rare's history on one platform, ranging from titles originally for the ZX Spectrum, Xbox, and even favorites last seen on Nintendo consoles. While there were obvious omissions like Donkey Kong, Mickey Mouse, and GoldenEye, given the inevitable licensing problems, the available software library was more than acceptable, as its breadth of content illustrated the range of genres Rare was once capable of producing. But the games weren't the only thing that made this compilation so exceptional. For the first time, players would be able to see and hear from many of the original designers themselves, offering a level of insight once considered unimaginable from a company as historically secretive as Rare. Not only that, but they would get to learn about projects once thought of as the stuff of legends, like the original incarnation of Banjo-Kazooie, Project Dream, and many other titles that never saw an official release. While some designers were surely unable to share all their thoughts unfiltered, this level of access was still a watershed moment, and perhaps the beginning of a new era of transparency Rare never experienced during the years of the Stamper brothers.
Time for Rare Replay.
Under the supervision of Craig Duncan, Rare became more open with its fans, as the studio wanted to show the industry that it was still capable of creating new properties that lived up to its legacy. As one portion of the studio worked on Rare Replay, which celebrated the company's past, a team of 5 engineers and a couple designers were tasked with figuring out Rare's future. They looked to industry trends to see what was popular and were drawn toward games where the concept of the player creating their own stories was built into the very fabric of its design. For 5 months, the team built a prototype, codenamed Athena, for a game with a low barrier to entry that would appeal to a wide audience and also continue to foster a welcoming community as it grew. This project would finally be unveiled alongside Rare Replay's announcement at E3 2015.
One of the things that Rare has done consistently over 3 decades is evolve as a studio. Rare has redefined genres with its own special formula, and we're ready to do that again. Today I'm proud to give you a first look at a new exclusive game from Rare. A game that will allow our players to have unique and memorable adventures together. A shared world adventure game. Set in a fantastical world, this game will bring players together and give them the freedom to play with limitless possibilities. This is by far the most ambitious game Rare has ever created.
Sea of Thieves is a massively multiplayer online game set in a pirate-themed open world designed for players on both the Xbox One and Windows PC. Players will be able to go on adventures with fellow pirates, taking part in diverse activities pirates are known for, like navigating the open seas with a fully operational ship, uncovering lost treasures, and battling against haunted skeletons and rival parties. In an unprecedented move toward open communication, Rare would even grant select players access to an early version of the game in order to receive direct feedback and improve Sea of Thieves during its development. With a planned release date in 2018, Sea of Thieves is shaping up to be one of the most ambitious projects in Rare's entire history. When video game companies like Rare have a tradition of being secretive and well-guarded, the inevitable consequence is that much of its designers will never receive the level of recognition they deserve. The spotlight is then only given to those who led the teams, or were behind elements like the music which garner immediate attention. As a result, players who aren't privy to what goes on behind the scenes are often left to their own conclusions when it comes to how their favorite games come together. On the other hand, many designers have also chosen to remain out of the spotlight when given the chance, as they would rather have their games speak for themselves. With the advancements of outlets like social media and crowdfunding, the opportunity for smaller developers to headline a new project has become more attainable, but also more challenging at the same time. An unfortunate reality any designer faces when moving out from the safety of an established company is the risk of clashing with other publishers or fading into obscurity. However, as seen with many of these designers' output over the years, with some even reaching beyond the realm of game design, the company culture fostered in Rare has produced some of the most creative minds in their fields. Many longtime fans of Rare will always lament how their once beloved developer fell into demise under the ownership of Microsoft. While certainly arguable in some respects, it's an illusion that sadly ignores the types of games Rare has produced over those years. Rare may not have been Microsoft's most successful developer, especially when compared to partners like Bungie and Epic Games, but they easily remain one of their most versatile. As others continue to develop iterative installments under a single franchise, Rare managed to produce titles ranging in genres that were vastly different from one another. That desire to create games that haven't been done before was something that's always defined Rare. They are a company that strives to defy expectations, whether or not it would result in backlash. It's a key component of their DNA, and a continued practice found not just in those who've left over the years, but even the ones who either remain or have only just begun their tenure.
You have to understand that Rare, as it's perceived now, there's a lot of nostalgia associated with Rare. There's a lot of rose-tinted glasses as well. I mean, they did amazing stuff for a long time. Not to denigrate anything that was done before Donkey Kong, but the thing that really catapulted it into sort of, this is the premier games company, games producer, was Donkey Kong, and I guess to a lesser extent Killer Instinct. And that was just the start of a real, a glut of really amazing products. Now, when you're in that at that time, you don't see it as that. You just go, oh, there's another game. You don't see it as a classic at the time. GoldenEye, when it was being done, was a film tie-in for a Bond film that wasn't out yet. I think it had come out by the time it came out. It was a film tie-in, and traditionally they've always been viewed, been sneered at. And now, of course, you mentioned GoldenEye. and it's like a godlike, revered product. The predictions for sales on that, from my memory, work great because I don't know, it was late. I don't think it was particularly well promoted when it came out. I don't know what the predictions for sales were. It wasn't 10 million. I can tell you that. The point I'm making is that at the time I wasn't intimidated by being in this situation because I wasn't aware of it. Now, if I'd known then what I know now about what Rare became and this kind of jewel in the crown of Nintendo, so to speak, certainly for the European sort of market, I'd probably be slightly intimidated. And I imagine new people coming into Rare who knew the sort of the pedigree, are thinking, oh my god, the hallowed halls, as it were. But I just didn't see it like that at the time. I've said this before, but I always just my theory on why Rare's games were at the time, streets ahead of anything else in terms of graphics and quality of the product was as much to do with the infighting between the teams who were all trying to get one up on each other as it was to what else was going on in the industry. So that rivalry kind of drove things.
As time continues to shape one's perspective of games that show their age with new technologies and standards, it's common to reevaluate many of them as simply moments in adolescence, unworthy of being any sort of generational touchstone outside a certain age or demographic of impressionable players. The truth is, for as long as the medium has existed, anyone can argue the degree to which one particular video game is on the level of another in terms of its lasting impact. But either way, the function it served once it's passed on from creator into the memory of the consumer is valued about the same. The consumer's reaction to a creative work, the emotion it invokes, and the meaning they invest it with thereafter will continue to exist independent of the work itself. One more cynical could say that's the purpose of all commercial art. But what matters then is whether or not they, the audience, believe the art in question actually does something interesting and meaningful once a connection has been made. Whether intentional or however trivial, many of Rare's games did just that. And if they hadn't, players wouldn't still have the fondness for the British developer they still have today. Rare created games heralded for focusing on fun, enjoyment, and memorable characters, which is why many often draw parallels to their former partner and collaborator Nintendo. The Japanese publisher was undoubtedly seen as a benchmark for the experiences Rare wanted to aim for, but as seen with a game like Conker, which baffled both Nintendo and Microsoft, the British developer was willing to challenge conventions, creating instant classics in the process. This was an ideal that started with the Stamper Brothers, and after 30 years and over 100 games produced, it continues to directly influence the people who experienced them.
Now, A Hat in Time is a 3D collectathon, which has kind of been missing in action recently. What games has inspired A Hat in Time?
Well, definitely Banjo-Kazooie and Mario 64.
I personally grew up with this type of game. Like, I love the memories I have of Donkey Kong and Spyro and Banjo-Kazooie, and there's such a positive, happy memories I have of those. Like, we have David Wise, which has been my idol in terms of video game music for as long as I can remember. Like, when I was a kid, I would just put on a Donkey Kong level and not even play, just listen to the music. Right. And while working, I regularly listen to Donkey Kong soundtrack and all this kind of geeky stuff. All because I admire David Wise. So when I got this chance to make this game, I sort of jokingly said, "Now I want David Wise to do the music." Yeah. A couple of weeks later, audio producer tapped me on the shoulder and he was like, "I got a surprise for you. We got David Wise doing the music. He loves to do it."
As the games industry changes with each generation, there come new demands and more expectations when it comes to developing a successful title. More measured approaches are necessary to ensure a company's continued success. As such, it's likely the Rare prior to Microsoft would no longer be in business today if they had continued as they were and not learned to adapt. Though many despise the Kinect Sports series, it's also become the studio's best-selling original property. Whatever the future holds for Rare, games like Sea of Thieves show that its designers chose not to rest on their laurels and continue to push themselves to deliver the unexpected. They are driven by much of the same ambition as the Stampers, who are also out there hoping to create the next big thing in video games. In hindsight, Tim always hoped his studios would have a dramatic impact on people's thinking when it came to the sort of software they can write. He hopes people keep pushing the boundaries with products intended to both surprise and delight, and they can be sure he and his brother will be doing the same.
something I can do for you, old woman?
Return our sapient immediately. You don't know what you're doing.
Yes, I do. I'm leaving.
And on the subject of axe-wielding mystical characters, this is Chris, who is the designer of Killer Instinct. Welcome to Bad Influence.
Am I offline now?
No, not yet. You gotta wave goodbye. You can do the Conquer voice if you two want. For
Hey.
We won't surrender. We stick together and we're never gonna fall. We'll brave the weather, take whatever as we drift along.
Through beaming red lights, we take a flight along the silent glowing land. You're there beside me, we'll find our way back home on these golden strands.
So, what'll it be?
Scotch. Single malt. Space side. No ice.
Huh. A man of taste. There you go.
Whoa there, cowboy. Keep it coming. Oh, leave the bottle.
Yeah. Looking a bit down. What's the matter?
You wouldn't believe it. Anyway, I don't want to talk about it. I'll just drink less. Not too bad tonight.